Hey YouTube, you're watching Bonham Music, and today we're going to a tutorial on how to capture audio for your gameplay videos. Enjoy. So the first thing that we're going to be looking at is your choice of microphone. Now you've got two major choices in this situation. You got your condenser microphone and your dynamic microphone. Put simply, your condenser microphone is more sensitive than your dynamic microphone. Now, that's not saying that the condenser is better than a dynamic microphone. It's just for different circumstances. So a dynamic mic is something that you'd be more inclined to use on a stage during a live performance than what you would for a condenser microphone. But in saying that, you can still use it if you're looking to record yourself playing video games and stuff like that. It's fine. In this video, we're going to be looking at using a USB condenser microphone. The reason for that is because, one, they're widely available. Two, they're a lot cheaper than a lot of their XLR Studio brothers. Like this AKG, I believe, is about $600 versus the microphone I'm using right now, which is a Rode NT USB, which cost me about $175. And so for that price, you can't really argue with the quality that you get for some of these USB microphones. The other reason is these guys are virtually plug and play in most situations. Plug that microphone in, it's going to do what it needs to do, and you don't need to worry about compressors. You don't need to worry about gain in most situations. So it's a really easy system for what you need to do. But in saying that, there's a couple of things that you can use to improve on that, and that's what the purpose of this video is. This leads into our next point, and this is probably just as crucial as selecting your microphone. This is microphone placement. So when we're looking at where we're going to put the microphone, we want to capture in our heads what we're looking to record. So in most cases, when you're playing a video game, it's going to be your voice, right? Unless there's other people in the room and things like that, which is where it can get a bit more complicated. But I think in this situation, we're going to look at just capturing one person. So we've got our keyboard set up here, so I'm going to use this table as a sort of example where the AKG is right now. And so you've got two choices straight off the bat in terms of how you're going to place the microphone. So the first one is using a microphone stand or a studio stand with a boom. So I've got one here. And so you can see here that there's a nice long boom on top of there that sits on top of the microphone stand. And what that's going to enable us to do is it's going to give us some range of motion to put the microphone in rather than a straightforward stand like this one. Alrighty, so this guy screws on the top here like so, screw it right in, microphone attaches to the other end down here, and enables you to put the mic in all kinds of positions. Very, very, very useful. And there is another reason as to why that is useful, which I'll touch on in a sec. So that one gives you a little bit more freedom in what you can do. The other type we're looking at is a sort of like a table stand, if you will. This is just the one that comes with the Rode NT USB. So this is the one I'm going to use in the example, but a lot of them tend to come with their own ones now. And look, they're a great little thing. This is like just made out of plastic. It's nothing really fancy or anything like that. It enables you to sit it there. I find that the microphone sits quite high when I use it, kind of gets in front of my screen when I use it. The important difference that the reason why I want to bring these up is there is a really important difference in terms of just starting out with what stand you want to use. This stand, when I place it, so this is our virtual table right here. If I place this on the table and I'm playing games, right? Obviously this is a very small table, but if I'm playing games here, anytime I touch the table, anytime I'm clicking the mouse, if I slam my key, like I get frustrated, I slam the keyboard, or I slam the mouse down a little bit too tight, like I lift it up and drag it across or something like that. All of those noises are going to go into that microphone because it's connected to that table. Sound is going to travel through whatever material, whatever medium is in that, whatever material is used in that table, and it's going to go straight up into the diaphragm of the mic, and you're going to get a rumble, or you'll get basically those sounds being captured instead of your vocal, which we don't really want. Now, in saying that, that is probably one of the biggest reasons that we want to look at using these two, but if you don't have a regular stand, you don't really need to unless your situation calls for it. Stands can be expensive. I believe these ones here are about 60 Australian dollars each. And so they can be a little bit expensive if you're money conscious. So what you can do is, if you don't want to look at that as your option, you prefer to use one of these, which are a lot quicker to set up, then what you can do is when you get to post, so in terms when you're mixing your video, when you're editing your video, and doing a mix of the audio, put a high pass filter over the actual audio track for your vocal. What I mean by that, I'll touch on that in a little bit to explain what that is, and I'll be using not Logic Pro, Final Cut Pro as a bit of an example, because that's what I use. Okay, so with that out of the way, we've looked at what we're going to use for a stand. Place this guy down here. Now we're going to need to look at how you're going to place it. So with these guys, it's pretty simple. You could just place the microphone right there, boom, it's in your face. With a studio stand, there's a couple of different options that you have. Now, this is where polar patterns come into play in terms of your microphone, okay? Polar patterns determine, the easiest way I could put it is to determine what sound it wants to capture. So a cardioid is going to focus on the front of the microphone and negate the rear as much as possible, okay? And that's really useful for broadcasting situations, like vocals on a song and things like that, because that's what you want to capture, right? A lot of these USB microphones tend to come with all different kinds, like they got omnidirectional, they got bidirectional. They've got, even some of them I've seen have like an XLR, like a stereo pair. It's kind of useless, okay? If you don't pay into those features, because you don't need to use them at all whatsoever, okay? They're not really useful for what you want to do, because you just want to capture that one vocal, okay? Stereo recordings for that is just a waste of time. You're just going to be capturing more audio, which increases the file size, and it's just going to get in the way. It's going to make the mix annoying and things like that. Just don't even bother with it, okay? If you really want to, you can, I suppose, but just from an audio standpoint, you're not going to gain much out of it, okay? So what we're going to look at is try and focus on getting a cardioid microphone. Pretty much all of them are going to come like that, but don't go paying extra for those additional features that you're never going to use. So omnidirectional basically captures the whole room sound, not focusing in on any one particular point really. Bidirectional captures from the front and back of the microphone, and then you've got your XLR pair, which is basically two microphones situated like this to capture a stereo image, okay? But we just want to focus on this. So we've got a cardioid microphone, so I'm going to open this guy up here. This is a Rode C214. It's a little baby condenser microphone. We'll pop all the stuff out here. And I will touch on just something for when you put your microphones away as well. So we're looking at the front of the microphone here, and that's the section where we want to focus towards our mouth. Otherwise, we're not going to capture much of anything, okay? So when we put these on the microphone stand, you can put them in any way you feel like. You don't have to have the microphone sitting face up. In actual fact, for some particular microphones, it's actually best to have them hanging upside down so the heat travels away from the diaphragm and away from the tube of the microphone. So we can put it forward, we can put it sideways, we can put it on an angle like this. It doesn't matter. It will change slightly the characteristics of how the sound's captured, but in some ways that can make it really unique. Okay, so it doesn't matter how you position the microphone, whether it's upside down, on its side, diagonal, it doesn't matter. As long as you've got that front facing towards the source that you want to capture, alrighty, and your mouth makes some sounds and stuff, you're going to be in a good spot in terms of that. Now, this is where it gets a little bit more technical. The reason why it's great to be able to place it in any way, shape, or form is, let's go back to the keyboard example. If I'm typing away on my keyboard here, and I have that microphone sitting on a stand just here, now it's obviously through what we were talking about before, it's going to travel into the microphone, but we want to negate as much as the outside sound as we possibly can. Now, how do we do that? We use the microphone to our advantage. So, like I said before, these cardioid mics, they don't like to, basically they're focused on the front. The rear, not so much, and like the diagonals to the rear, pretty much nothing at all, okay? So we want to use that to advantage. So try the best that you can to put any sound sources such as mouse clicking or keyboard behind that, okay? The further away the better, but obviously it's dictated by your current setup. So if you can do that, it's going to minimize the amount that comes into, obviously if things get really loud, it's still going to capture it. But what it will do is it'll help to lower basically the volume, so to speak, of that audio. So when it becomes to editing your video, you can pretty much get rid of that pretty easily, and I'll explain that later on. So that's microphone placement, okay? That's what we're focusing on in this scenario. Now let's move on to our next topic, which is something I see a lot in a lot of game videos and things like that, and it's something that triggers me just a little bit in terms of the audio side of things. It can be quite frustrating, and that's to do with accessories such as pop filters, which I see overused to their absolute, yeah, I'm not even gonna say it, as well as windshields, and we're gonna be looking at shock mounts. Now after this section, that's what I'm going to show you about putting your microphone away to help increase the longevity a little bit. It's a good little practice to get into. Okay, so let's start off with the pop filter. So this guy's just a cheap little pop filter that I got. Nice little clamp for a stand. These guys are designed to stop plosive sounds, such as p and k and t. So right now, I'm not using one because I don't need it. And I'm going to show you what happens if I get close to the microphone and start making those plosives. P and k and t. Now, this guy has a membrane, as most microphones do, to try and stop that from happening, but it should have still captured some of those plosives in there. It's an undesired effect, and it causes the microphone to pop, and it's very annoying, i.e. the pop filter. What this guy does is it basically uses this mesh here that's quite tightly knitted to absorb those plosive, the air that's being pushed into the capsule of the microphone, and therefore causing that pop to happen. This is really only necessary, when you're getting close to the microphone. So a good place to start for microphone placement is about a palm's width away. That's considered pretty darn close, but that's the closest you'd really want to get to it in most situations. And in that situation, you more than likely want a pop filter there to stop those plosives, or it's just going to ruin that sensual sound you'll get from being really close. So I'm going to do that again here. So if I go p and k and t, I can actually feel the air hitting this and sort of springing off and smacking me back in the face. So that's what they're used for. If you're using a microphone a distance away like this, or it's not pointed at you, you're not going to be speaking into the microphone, you don't need it. It will change how the audio sounds. I know it sounds stupid, but it will, okay? And besides, these things now cost about $60, $40, that kind of stuff. It's not worth anything like that. You don't need one if you got your microphone placement set up well, okay? Another thing, just quickly, if you do need one and you don't have one and you don't want to spend that much money, a good alternative is to get a coat hanger, bend it around in the shape of a circle as best as you can, get a stocking or something like that, or even 2 stockings if you really, really, really want to, and put those over the top, and there you go, you got a pop filter. This NT USB comes with one if you really need it, and from what I've seen of it, it's pretty decent. So that's pop filters. Next, we're going to talk about windshields. Now, windshields are designed for obviously blocking out the wind in an environment that's less easy to control, stop the wind from blowing into the microphone, that kind of stuff, which causes those pops and things like that, like what we heard before. These can be used as a pop filter as well, to filter out plosive sounds. Now, they do affect the sound a lot more than a pop filter does, so bear that in mind. But if you have one of these in your case, and you don't have a pop filter, perfect, not a problem. So this guy here, this C214 comes with one, doesn't come with a pop filter. Pop that straight on if you really needed to in a certain situation. There you go. Do not use this in conjunction with a pop filter. It's stupid, it's pointless. Please, please, please do not do it. You're wasting your time, you're wasting your money, okay? Now, let's pop that back in here. And the last thing I want to talk about is a shock mount. So just like with this Rode NT USB, I keep getting it confused with the NT10, which isn't my favorite microphone, but I keep getting it confused. So this is the NT USB, it's different, okay? So this is a shock mount. Now, shock mounts are designed to sit, obviously, so the microphone sits in this section here, and I don't know if you can see that, but there's some like coils going around that sort of suspends that microphone in the middle. So if I push in on it, you can see it sort of moves relatively freely inside of there. This end then attaches onto the microphone stand, and the microphone sits in its placement upside down, left, right, doesn't matter. Now, the reason why these are useful is it helps to basically decouple that microphone from the ground a little bit. It helps to give it some shock resistance. So if you were to go around and have a situation where there's some vibration in the floor, or maybe there's some trucks, you live on a main street and there's some trucks going past, that sound's going to travel through the earth and through, obviously, the building that you're in, because more than likely your ground's not going to be decoupled. And what that's going to do is it's going to go straight into the microphone diaphragm, and it's going to give some rumble. So this will help basically to remove that rumble for you. If you don't have one of these in the microphone that you purchased, don't go out and purchase one. You don't need to unless it's absolutely necessary, okay? Like if you lived right next to a truck stop or a train station, then I'd probably say you want to get one of these. But what we're going to be looking at, and probably a dynamic mic as well, what we're going to be looking at is you can use EQ the same way we did before, which we'll talk about very soon, I promise, as to how to remove those rumbles from your audio in the least destructive way that you possibly can. So like I said, if you don't absolutely need one, you don't have to go buy one because they can be a little bit expensive. All right. Now, Before we put everything back, I just want to touch on a little thing quickly. You may have noticed when you buy your microphone, you get these little silicone balls. Do not throw these out. They are very useful. Whenever you finish using your microphone, clean the front, or basically the area you've been talking to of the microphone, with a cloth. I usually just clean the whole thing all the way around. And make sure that the cloth's not wet or anything like that. It's going to help to remove saliva or any condensation on the microphone before you put it back. Okay, you then want to get your silicone balls and place it over the front of the diaphragm, so in other words that front section of the microphone, to absorb any remaining moisture that may be on the microphone for when you put it away. It helps to prolong the life of your microphone, and you'll find that like I know I was reading through the NT USB manual and it mentions it in there, so good on your road. It'll help you to increase the longevity of your microphone, so please do. We've gone through which microphone we're going to use and why. We've gone through the placement of our microphone, and we've gone through the accessories that we're going to use. All right, so now we're going to get into a little bit more of the recording and a slightly bit of the technical side. So most of you, or some of you, may have heard of sample rate and bit rate, or bit depth, or word length. So sample rate is basically where a converter, called an analog to digital converter, takes measurements of the audio you're putting through into it at discrete points in time. Now, depending on how many samples per second determines on how much of an accurate reading it's going to get of that waveform. So put in layman's terms, the higher the resolution or the higher the amount of samples, the more accurate representation you're going to get and the better frequency response. Bit depth has a similar premise where the higher the better, but it's a little bit different. So it determines word length. And what that basically means is for every extra bit, you get 6 dB of increased dynamic range. So in terms, it's a little bit more technical, I suppose, than sample rate. But put simply, we're going to be looking at try and capture the highest you possibly can. When you're in that recording stage, record the highest you possibly can for the microphone you have. It will increase the amount you need for storage. So if you have it, definitely use it. If you don't, it's fine. Like I said, in these situations for recording videos, we're going to be downgrading it anyway, so it doesn't matter an incredible lot, but it will help increase the quality in those stages of compression, okay? So for this one here, I'm actually using, it's 48, so the sample rate is 48,000, and the bit depth, word length, however you want to call it, we're looking at here is 16-bit. Capture it at the best resolution you can for your current setup. Don't mind a lot of storage being used, jump on that, select the highest you possibly can. We've got that all set up in here, which is great. So we've gone into either if you're using a Mac, you've gone into your Mac settings for the audio, or if you're using a Windows computer, you've gone into the recording options for that, and you've changed it to the highest resolution you can. Now, in terms of how to do that, there's a lot of tutorials and things like that on how to do that in your different software. So I'm not going to touch on it, but simply head over, I believe, like in most USB microphone user manuals, it's going to show you exactly how to do it on both operating systems. So if you haven't already, jump on there. Otherwise, do a quick Google. Okay. Now we've set that all up here. Now we want to talk about how we're going to capture the audio for the easiest way possible later when we get to our editing stage. So the easiest way for you to be able to go in and change things. Now, I found that OBS is the easiest for this. I think I said that right. OBS? Yes, OBS. So OBS basically allows for multi-track recording. What that means is that we can have, instead of just recording one track where everything gets put into this one track, so the game sound, your desktop sound, everything gets put in here, you can split that up to however you like. So a basic setup would be track 1, you can put basically like your master track, you put all your sounds in track 1. So your game sound, so if you're just recording a microphone in your desktop, in other words your game, then you put that into track 1. So your microphone in track 1 and the desktop sound in track 1. Then what you want to do is in track 2, put your microphone only. Okay? And then in track 3, put the desktop audio only. So this will give you more freedom by separating these tracks later on when you're going down to mixing the audio to give a better balance for the user experience, okay? So that's just a quick little thing on that. Now, as far as I'm aware, OBS is the only one that can do that. I'm not entirely sure if there are others. There more than likely would be, but you'd need to do a bit of Google on that. I'm not entirely sure. Here's where we're going to get into a little bit. So you remember how before we were talking about we capture the audio at the highest resolution we can. Now, he's putting that into the computer, and then what's going to happen is your software, so your game capture software, is then going to compress that down, okay? Just because it doesn't make a heck of a lot of sense to have the audio so high, it takes up a lot of space. So more than likely it's going to compress that down. If it does, you want to use AAC, okay, as the file type, okay? It's a very good codec, way better than MP3 in terms of the way that it works. So definitely jump on board with that, okay? A lot of YouTube uses it, Apple uses it, Spotify uses it. Pretty much all of them use it now, okay? Because it's always been better than MP3. RIP MP3. We want to select that as our output type. And then what we want to do is we want to then go through and we want to select to the bit rate that we want. Now, a good bit rate to use is 192 kbs per second. So in other words, kilobytes per second. And the reason why we want to use that is because if you use when you upload to YouTube, there's certain specifications, just like with the videos and stuff like that. They do some compression and stuff like that. And 192 is, from the research that I've done, is what it's going to, for 180p video and anything higher, that's what it's going to use. It's going to use 192 kilobytes per second. So there's no sense in going higher than that because it's just going to render it down anyway and increase the upload size of your file. Not by much, but still, every bit counts. See what I did there? If we can get it down to there, it saves having to downscale it later by YouTube or anything like that may occur afterwards. We want to compress it once and leave it at that compressed level, not compress it and then compress it again. Okay? So capturing it at 192 kilobytes per second, okay, and now we're good to go. So if you're using OBS, just a quick note, make sure you set that on all your tracks, not just one. Okay, so 192 on all the tracks all the way down. Cool stuff. Another quick little, just a side little thing, 192 kbs and 320 kbs, most people can't really tell the difference between those two, so don't concern yourself with it too much. There is some reading that I'll mention later on, some references, where if you're interested in this kind of stuff but you don't know where to start, I'll give you some references where you can start. We've just captured our game, you know, PlayerUnknown's, doesn't matter what it is. We've got this awesome game video, we've edited it, and now we're getting to the audio stage, and this is the part that I kind of likes doing. So what we want to do is first, we're going to, now in this situation, we're going to be primarily looking at the recordings that we just made of our voice. So the first thing we want to do is solo just that track alone. So we just want to listen to that. Now, is there any rumble? Is there low-end frequencies in there that are rumbling the mic? More than likely there is. And what we want to do is like, you don't really need anything like below 100 hertz really for that voice. That's going to be taken up by the game anyway. It's going to be muffled. There's not really anything you're going to do to go that low, you know what I mean? Like, that really makes it necessary. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a high pass filter like what we were talking about before. In other words, the high frequencies and anything above that threshold can slip right through. Alrighty, whereas a low pass filter means that all the low frequencies towards a certain point can drop off. So it moves, you'll see it. It's like sort of like a little conveyor belt with an arm that drops off at the end and you can move it like this. What we're going to do is set a high pass filter and we're going to put it at about 100 hertz to start rolling off those frequencies. And basically we're just freeing up some space in the mix. We're trying to remove that rumble, improve the audio quality. So once we've done that, we're going to have a listen to the track, make sure there's no pop sounds, make sure that there's no distortion or anything like that. Now, more than likely, when you get excited, you're going to get louder, right? And so what we do is, a typical thing to do is we want to use a bit of compression to try and bring that down, level out the audio a bit, and because we've got these separate tracks, it'll enable you to do that. It'll enable you to get that in there and mix it in perfectly where you're not hyper compressing the crap out of everything and all that kind of stuff. So add a little bit of compression. A limiter shouldn't be necessary, but you know, if some engineers prefer to put in a limiter or anything, just in case something happens. But yes, you can use one if you really do need to in terms of the game sound and stuff like that. So feel free to use one of those if you want to. So you've just finished everything. Your video is edited. It's looking really good. Now it's time to export. So for the audio settings, what you're going to want to do is you want to go through, and if you can choose not to compress it, do that, because your audio has already been compressed. Okay, you don't need to compress it again. It's already at 192 kilobytes per second in AAC. Okay, so you're totally fine. Okay, now some software, now the only one I know of, and the reason for that is because I use it, is Final Cut Pro. Final Cut Pro does not really give that much flexibility in terms of the audio that that it releases, so to speak, exports. So what you want to do is this end part is just strictly for you Final Cut Pro people. When you're recording in your game capture software, make sure you record at the highest resolution you can. So I believe that'll probably be 320 kilobytes per second. The reason for that is I don't know what bitrate it uses to export it out as. And therefore we want to use the highest we can. So when it downgrades it again, hopefully we don't lose that much. It's not the best and not the most ideal by any means, but to be honest, when it comes to exporting out of that kind of software, it's not something that I typically do. So yeah, it's not ideal. And if people do have workarounds, please let us know. If you've got a video on a workaround like that, put it in the description. Put it down in the comments section. I'll upvote it so that way people can see. All right, and that's it. We're done. Thank you so much for watching. If you learned something, leave a like down the bottom. Subscribe if you're interested in more. And most importantly, comment below. I want to know what you found useful. If you know any workarounds to some of the questions that I asked before, what works for you, what doesn't. If you're still confused about anything, please submit it down below and I'll do the best that I can to answer it. And I'm sure a bunch of other people will as well. Okay, so the whole purpose of these tutorials is to help you to improve your audio quality and your capturing experience for when you're making these games. It's all about creativity and having fun, and I hope this helps you to achieve that. Hey guys, so I just wanted to let you know, if you're looking for some more information on audio and you don't really know where to start, I can give you some 3 good suggestions by the same author, and it's Bobby Owsinski, and he writes 3 books, 3 series. And so we've got the Mastering Engineer's Handbook, we've got the Recording Engineer's Handbook, and the Mixing Engineer's Handbook, looking at 3 different sections of the production process, so to speak. It's not specifically for music. It does touch on other things as well. It's definitely worth a read if you're not sure where to start, because he will link you to further, more detailed references if you want specific knowledge in those areas. So I would strongly suggest, if you're interested in that kind of stuff, I would highly recommend those books. Okay, thank you.